My name is Lucas Evart, and this is the Rising Star. And it's inspired by the Venture Star and the Space Shuttle a little bit. For those who don't know, the Venture Star was a reusable spaceplane concept that was under development by NASA, and it got canceled just prior to the prototype being finished. So sadly, we'll probably never see one fly. It used a linear aerospike engine. I've used a Sabre-style engine, more like a Skylon spaceplane concept for this design, which is a hybrid rocket which can breathe air as a jet engine when it's at low altitudes and speeds, and then when it switches to a closed cycle rocket engine when it gets to higher altitude. And this is a passenger craft built to minifigure scale. So if it was a real plane, it'd be about roughly 62 meters long is what I calculated. It's kind of difficult to say because the minifigure doesn't really fit human exact shape. So, it depends on which scale you like to use, but I picked an easy one that made it that size. It actually has 76 passenger seats on the interior. I can open it up for you here in a little bit. This project is also done under my little Evert's Aerospace brand that I do all my aerospace stuff under. I tried to be truthful to the shape of the Sabre engine exhaust, and it's got some hazard warning symbols for the oxygen and hydrogen fuels that would be inside of that. Tried to keep the lifting body shape as close as I could. Experimented with some techniques with trying to create a drapery for the back part of it out of those little wristbands from the dot sets to create a little bit of a curvature.
Yeah, those are tough shapes to get with Lego.
They are, yes, definitely.
And another thing that stands out when you first walk up to this build is kind of all of the great curves, especially along the sides there. Obviously, you've got tons of white tiles on here as well. So how did you achieve some of those angles and shapes?
That was somewhat of a challenge. The sides were kind of difficult because in order to get that curve to line up, there has to be hinge plates underneath, and then there's long, thin strips supporting them. So they are somewhat fragile, depending on how you crunch into them if you grab them the wrong way. Some of it's held together with magnets. Not much of it. The engine intake cowlings are held together with magnets to get the angle to sit just right because none of the hinge plates wanted to really work the way I wanted them to. And there's a lot of hinges along the sides and things. Magnets in the nose as well. So it is difficult to get some of those shapes to stay together.
These wings are also at a very interesting angle that looks like it would not always stay up very nicely.
Yeah, actually, that was a difficult thing. The first attempt was to use some ball joints and then just let them sit against the side under their own weight with leverage, but unfortunately that resulted in a spontaneous unplanned disassembly on the floor, so that got scrapped. And instead I ended up just using lift arms, because these sit at the angle of the standard Technic lift arm, and then just building enormous blocks of brick, with tile around it to smooth it on the sides, that just slide into the big slots when you just insert them on the sides of the plane. And then they just pull right back out again when you want to take it apart. So it worked out to be pretty easy to transport and reassemble.
Perfect. And you mentioned there was an interior to this as well. Can you show us some of that?
Absolutely. So I tried to, like I said, build it to minifigure scale. So it's about half populated. I've got the interior compartment there with the various random passengers, a little flight attendant station in the back with a first aid kit. One of the things people have asked me is there a kitchen back there? But I don't think you'd want to feed people just before they get to zero gravity, especially if it's their first time. So no, there is no in-flight meal on this flight. And then I can open up the front too. It's a little bit more difficult to get apart because I didn't design it easily and removable, but it actually does have an interior or detailed interior cockpit and little airlock compartment there. So the airlock sits between the cockpit and the passenger compartment, so there's just one airlock for everybody to use when they're either boarding or getting off. And there are some custom stickers. They're a little hard to see on the insides of the doors, but they are in there.
I love this. So it's like a space tourism type vehicle.
Yeah, or just a passenger plane to take people up to low Earth orbit station that then they transfer to someplace else, like the moon or what have you.
No, that sounds like a lot of fun there as well. So talk about kind of the overall structure of the build, because how this thing is how long?
I want to say it's about 63 inches.
Okay.
So there was not a lot of sag, honestly. I was surprised by how well it held up when I put it on the stand. I did have to go back in and add a beam down the center. There's a lot of 2x4 brick in there. Just a lot of 2x4 brick interlocked, and then layers of plate over that. Because the bottom is studs down, and the top is studs up, there's a bunch of inversion going on inside there as well. A lot of little half plate offsets to deal with, which was just fun, challenging and fun. And if you really want to see inside of it, I can pull the passenger compartment out, and you can actually see some of the rainbow-colored support beams. But it's up to you.
I mean, if you're willing to, yeah, it's always cool to see more of the interior of these and see how they come together.
These are some of those magnetic ones I was talking about, where they're just held in by these two magnets that allows it to sit just at this perfect angle to get what I wanted it to look like, and then the intakes are just kind of attached like that.
That easy disassembly, I'm sure, is a very helpful thing when transporting it to show.
It really is, yes. This was just able to all the loose pieces is fit in one cardboard box, and then the frame fits in a special wooden crate that I made to transport it.
Perfect. Yeah, I love seeing the structure in there. Obviously, all those Technic beams, and like you said,
Yeah.
a lot of 2x4 brick. You really get an idea of what it takes to hold something like this together.
Yeah, this whole central part, the whole middle beam that goes down the center was added just because there was about maybe a 2 millimeter sag at the nose, and it was just enough when the passenger compartment sat in there, it would kind of rock back and forth a little bit on that central bolt. So it did have to be reinforced, but it wasn't too bad to do.
And obviously, you've got massive quantities in both black and white pieces here in this build. Did you have those on hand, or were a lot of those things you had to track down?
Well, because I don't have a giant house, I do have to take things apart, after I build them. So a couple years ago, I had the big ring ship, the Vespucci, that had the gravity rings and everything, and many of the parts are in here. So everything gets taken apart. And so the white, I did have most of that. I did purchase a few larger white tiles, but the bottom, the black part, and some of these slopes for the edges I didn't have. So I did have to add those on. And the bottom tiles, there's just so much square footage to cover. The big 8x16 tiles were the only efficient way to do it, but they're ridiculously expensive. So I don't want to talk about it.
There you go.
I don't want to get in trouble.
Now you do have some great kind of landing gear on the bottom as well there, right?
Yeah, they fold up into the fuselage, and the little hatches cover them up. Some folks have asked me if you could actually set this on the landing gear, and I'll be honest, you can't.
Okay.
I don't know how you would build a landing gear that would support that much weight without it, and still be able to move it without having to take any fixed pieces out of it. I know there's a gentleman does the large airplane builds, and he does landing gear, but I think most of his may have to remove a solid piece, and I just needed to be able to reach up and do it without having to get inside, and so I figured, not like I'm going to lift it up off the stand anyway. It's a two-person swoosh if you.
Yes, I love the shirt as well.
Yeah, if you can swish this around and play with it if you have a strong friend that you trust, but otherwise it's not really a one-person thing. So.
I love that. And then the overall presentation style is great as well. So talk about kind of the stand you've built for this and how you decided to present it.
Yeah, originally I didn't. I was designing it all in my head, and I actually got into a CAD program, and I designed a stand that was actually a little different than this. It's made out of 4 pieces of plexiglass, and it was at a steeper angle though. And it turned out when I put the fuselage on a stand at home on a table like this, the top of it was about eye level almost with me. The nose was, and that's a little too steep. So I decided to change it up a little bit, and I cut the plexiglass pieces that I had them made by a CNC company. I ended up just cutting them down at home to half that angle, and then dropping the whole height down a bit, and then just finding some scrap wood that I had in the wood shop, and I quickly put it together because I had about 3 days to get it done. But it's really sturdy, and it holds it up, totally stable. So, and I think it kind of disappears underneath in the dark anyway. So
you mentioned earlier kind of the different sections of it. So when you bring this to show, how does that transport?
Yeah, so the wings, come out. Like I said, the tail fin is just locked into some Technic axle that just slots in there. Obviously, this comes out. The cockpit section comes out as well. And then the draped section with the little strips that are all on those dots wristbands, that whole section and the 2 panels next to it also come off relatively easily. And then the dot section just kind of gets disassembled because it wouldn't survive transit. With the flexing, they just all pop off anyway. So I just put them in a plastic bag and just bring them in and just stick them on. And then I try for 20 minutes to get that thing to sit on there with nothing popping off in the process of getting it on. And once it's there finally, I leave it alone.
There you go. And I love kind of the inspiration and source material for this. So these kind of like futuristic, almost NASA vehicles, is that something you've built in the past or something you hope to do more of?
I do, yeah. That is kind of my focus, actually. Most of the time, most of my builds are about that. My goal, if I'm in my wildest dreams, I hope that maybe somebody will come in the door and see something like this and then go out and actually build it for real someday.
There you go.
Because I'm not mathematically inclined enough to do it, so I know I'm getting older. I'm hoping that somebody else will.
Yeah, no, that's the beautiful thing about these LEGO conventions is just the way that kids especially can come in and be inspired by all the different builds on display, and you never know what ideas they'll take home from that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, keep up the amazing work. This looks fantastic here. I love it. It's kind of right when you walk in the door. Very eye-catching spot here in the convention, so I'm glad you were able to bring it out to the show.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks.